I graduated from college. I went to Korea for 2 years. I taught English there at a couple different universities for a couple years. Um, while I was in Korea, I applied to law school. Went to law school in '95, I guess, at Georgetown Law. Started law school there, um, and wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to do civil rights work, working with the Asian American community. I thought I wanted to do public policy work, and then a lot of my classes I took were centered around that. I took a federal legislation clinic. I interned for Senator Ted Kennedy, as a law clerk for a semester. Um, but then, life, family circumstances, got married, got a clerkship with a federal judge in Greenbelt, Maryland, actually not far from where I kind of lived or grew up until I was 6. And then, went to a law firm, partly because of, my wife was working in the nonprofit sector, working on Asian American issues, actually. And, wanted to try and pay down some loans and get a house and whatever. So I went to a law firm. I got good training, was a litigator there, worked at a firm called Aiken Gump in DC, but then went out to Virginia to help open a tech office out there. And then was there for about 4 years. Went then to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland, back to the courthouse where I clerked in Greenbelt, and for Judge Massetti. Peter Massetti was the judge I clerked for, and then I actually appeared before him for a while when I was an assistant U.S. attorney. So I was a federal prosecutor doing criminal cases in Greenbelt from 2003 until 2011, end of 2011, or 2010. But in 2009, so I did a bunch of trials. I worked on criminal cases. I worked on drug cases, violent crime, gun cases, child pornography, tax, immigration fraud, white collar cases, a whole range of cases. The last 2 years of my time at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I worked a lot on gang cases, so organized crime gang cases, particularly around MS-13, which is a gang, a Salvadoran gang, actually started in LA, but then kind of developed in El Salvador. And that was extremely rewarding, interesting, very intense, very stressful. I ran into somebody after a series of trials when I was talking about moving on to just try something else, and they told me about a detail opportunity on the Hill. So it was basically where I could get loaned out, stay as an AOSA, but got loaned out from the Department of Justice to the Hill. So I became a detailee for Senator Patrick Leahy from Vermont. He was then the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And that was in June of 2009. And essentially I was in the Senate for about 8 years, from 2009 until just recently this year. And so I was detailee. I stayed on permanently, was senior counsel, then became general counsel for the committee for the Democrats, working for Senator Leahy. And then after November of last year, after the election, when he went to the Appropriations Committee and Senator Feinstein became ranking member, I stayed on. She asked me to stay on as general counsel for the Democrats for the Senate Judiciary Committee under her. And then now I'm at a lobbying, consulting, government affairs firm called Monument Policy Group. I got there about 2 months ago, working mostly with tech clients. I don't know my Asian American identity. Well, certainly my Asian American identity is what, in a way, influenced my my decision to go to law school. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, my decision to go to law school was based a lot on my interest in working with the Asian American community on civil rights issues, trying to help out the community and thinking that a law degree might help in some respects. I went a different path in the sense of I went to, working in a law firm and being an AOSA. That being said, sort of the sense of public service, a sense of public interest in working, that absolutely was partly from my Asian American identity, or being, a sense of being a minority, trying to help, um, promote the interests of justice and equality. Certainly, to the extent that, in a very large extent, my parents' influence and the influence of my father and mother instilling in me the sense of giving back to the community, being a good citizen, being, you know, um, somebody who's contributing to society. That certainly impacted me as well, and it played a role in um, starting out the. I don't know if I talked about this already, but I started the Asian Pacific American Legal Resource Center in DC. So while I was in law school, during my third year of law school, we started a free legal clinic, or a legal clinic um, referral service, if you will, for Asian Americans in the DC area, and started as an all volunteer organization. We got law students from the various DC schools to help staff a multilingual hotline, and then we worked with other Asian American attorneys in the area to try and develop a pro bono service, and then ultimately became a separate, fully funded nonprofit organization that's now still in existence. It's actually coming up on its 20th anniversary soon.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's great. So that's certainly my Asian American identity played into wanting to, um, you know, do as much as I could, either in building an organization like the APA Legal Resource Center, or continuing to give back over time on public policy issues. And whether it's as an AUSA, when I was a prosecutor, I certainly was conscious of the fact that I was an Asian American. Certainly was conscious of the fact that I was oftentimes the only Asian American in the room, whether it's the law enforcement folks or in the courtroom. Um, and that played a role in me being even more committed to doing as much as I could, and doing as good of a job as I could. In the public policy context, on the Hill, there are very relatively few Asian Americans. More now, but when I first got there weren't many at all. There still aren't a lot on the Senate side in particular, and I think I appreciate the fact that it's important to be at the table. It's important to be in the room. It's important to be a part of the process, and it's important to be able to provide a different perspective as an Asian American, and as the son of immigrants. It was good. I mean, it was a new organization. We actually, I think it's started the year before I got there, or a couple years. Maybe it was a little longer, but there weren't a lot of Korean Americans. It started growing over time. That was a great experience. I was an officer on the board at some point for that. We actually also, an offshoot, we started, I guess this was another memorable experience. We started a Samanori group. So we started it's called Unity. We started the Korean drum group at Yale. I remember going down. We went to Flushing, New York, where there was some folks who were super good at that, and sort of the experts who were our teachers, learning how to play Korean drums when we didn't have Korean drums yet, so we had to raise money. So we started learning on ramen boxes and making a lot of noise. And once we got the drums, and getting kicked out of various school buildings, university buildings, because we were making too much noise and waking up the dorm rooms. So that was fun.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm everywhere for all these questions.
Yeah. Oh, I will say, sorry, I'm back in terms of a memorable experience. I do remember, just in terms of tying into the Asian American experience, I do remember being on campus when the LA riots happened, and so that was a memorable experience, in the sense that it was a time where we in the Asian American community, and the Korean American community in particular, because of all the violence that was happening in Koreatown, and I had friends who were from Koreatown, and they were trying to keep tabs on their family as well, but getting together and sort of linking arms with the African American students group, with the Latino students group, with other student groups as well, advocating for better relationships, not just out obviously throughout the country in LA, but particularly in New Haven, and protesting out on the plaza, and going into, there was a big alumni gathering, and we were protesting out. We got to go in and speak and talk to them, and remember being one of the representatives, speaking out on these issues, and that was, it was a small thing. It was, certainly not, you know, looking back, I'm not sure that we, changed the course of, the relationships, but it was certainly, at least for me, a memorable experience and part of what helped me to, stay involved, with the community, trying to be active and trying to also work in coalition with other people and other groups.
Probably getting because like for me, I think like actually because like for me it would be like one thing that like my parents always like make sure to pound into is like respect.
Yeah, I mean that was a word that was coming to my mind as well. I mean it sounds very stereotypical, right? And like, oh, the Confucian values. But I think there's a lot to be said for that, right? I mean it's the respect, but it goes back to also to the kind of connection or connectedness and relationship to people. So it's not just empty respect, right? It's not just like bowing or showing respect or giving something with two hands, as it's sort of an empty gesture. It's a connection between a personal relationship and learning and getting to care for somebody, and the respect that you kind of imbue into that in a way, right? It's not just. And I think that's what I've learned from my parents and learned in the Korean culture. And like it's, Koreans are feisty folks, right? And the Koreans, it's the jung, right? It's like the feeling, the sense that there's really a connection there between people, right? So I think that's more. It's like it is, and this is something I picked up more and more when I went to Korea, but also like looking back on my time, growing up with my parents and my grandmother who lived with us for many years. It's not just like hollow formality of respect. It is the respect that comes out of knowing and understanding how you are connected and you relate to people, and how you have to learn and how much you have to learn from folks who are your elders and your peers, your 선배 even, right? But how much also they have done for you, whether you know it or not. I'm not sure about life lessons, but I'll say that one thing that I've certainly learned over the years is that relationships matter, that personal connections, not in the sort of transactional sense, but personal connectedness and relationships matter, not only in the personal and family context and friendship context, but also at work, also at in the professional sense. When I was a prosecutor, it was important to have a personal, connection or relationship with both my colleagues, but then also defense counsel, also the judges, also even, the agents I worked with. Not that I was best friends with everybody, but to have some, a sense of the other person's humanity, and I think that goes a long way. To do it so genuinely, I think, is important, because to have an interest in other people's lives, and you may not like everybody. In fact, I know I didn't like everybody, but it's a matter of also just making that effort to at least try to have some sort of connection, and that I think goes a long way over time towards whatever the other, whether it's professional or personal goal, whatever it might be.